Imagine this. You're 35 years old, standing in your kitchen at 2 a.m., staring at your phone after another failed relationship. The same pattern, again. You attract people who can't commit, or maybe you're the one who runs when things get serious. You know something's wrong, but you can't put your finger on what. You've read the self-help books, tried dating apps, even went to therapy for a few sessions, but nothing seems to stick. What if I told you that the root of this pattern and virtually every other problem in your adult life was decided before you could even tie your shoes? Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who revolutionized our understanding of the human psyche, discovered something that most people spend their entire lives not knowing. Your childhood doesn't just influence who you become, it creates the invisible blueprint that controls every decision you make as an adult. This isn't about dramatic abuse or neglect. It's about the 1,000 tiny moments that shaped your nervous system, the subtle ways your caregivers responded to your needs, the emotional atmosphere you absorbed when you were too young to understand what was happening. Jung called these imprints complexes, clusters of emotionally charged memories that operate like hidden programs running in the background of your mind. Here's the disturbing truth. Most adults are not actually adults. They're children in grown-up bodies, unconsciously repeating the same emotional patterns they learned before they were 7 years old. The way you handle conflict, form relationships, deal with stress, and see yourself, all of it was programmed during those early years when your brain was developing its most fundamental neural pathways. Recent neuroscience research has confirmed what Jung intuited nearly a century ago. A groundbreaking study from the University of Essex examined brain scans from over 580 children who experienced trauma and found something remarkable. Childhood experiences literally rewire the brain's neural networks. The default mode network, which governs self-reflection and internal awareness, becomes disrupted. The central executive network, responsible for decision-making and emotional regulation, becomes hyperactive. What this means is that your adult brain is still operating from the emotional programming of your child brain. When your partner doesn't text you back, your nervous system doesn't respond as a confident adult. It responds as the 5-year-old who felt abandoned when mum was too busy to comfort you. When your boss criticizes your work, you don't hear professional feedback. You hear the voice of the parent who never seemed satisfied with anything you did. Jung understood that we don't just inherit our parents' eye color and height. We inherit their unresolved emotional patterns, their fears, their way of seeing the world. These psychological inheritances create what he called the personal unconscious, a repository of forgotten memories and suppressed emotions that continues to influence your behavior decades later. The most terrifying part? You're completely unaware this is happening. You think you're making conscious choices, but you're actually being controlled by invisible forces from your past. You wonder why you always sabotage good opportunities, why you choose partners who remind you of your parents, why you repeat the same mistakes over and over again. But here's what gives me hope. Jung also discovered that these patterns can be broken. The same neuroplasticity that allowed your childhood experiences to shape your brain can be harnessed to reshape it. But first, you need to understand exactly how your particular childhood created your particular adult problems. This isn't about blame or dwelling in the past. It's about liberation. When you understand the hidden mechanisms that have been running your life, you can finally take back control. You can stop being a prisoner of patterns you didn't choose and start creating the life you actually want. Before we go deeper into how your childhood specifically shaped your adult mind, I want to ask you to subscribe to this channel and give this video a like. The algorithms tend to hide content that challenges people to look at uncomfortable truths, but if you engage with this video, it signals that you want more content like this. Your subscription helps me continue creating videos that can genuinely change lives. So let's dive into the invisible architecture of your psyche and discover how your earliest experiences continue to control your adult reality. The problem isn't that bad things happened to you as a child. The problem is that your developing brain interpreted these experiences as universal truths about reality, and then spent the rest of your life gathering evidence to support these interpretations. Jung called this phenomenon psychological complexes. Unlike Freud, who focused primarily on sexual trauma, Jung understood that any emotionally charged experience in childhood could create lasting imprints on the psyche. These complexes operate like autonomous subpersonalities within you, each with its own set of beliefs, emotions, and behavioral patterns. Here's how it works. When you were young, your brain was in a highly plastic state, rapidly forming neural connections based on your environment. Your nervous system was designed to adapt to whatever conditions it encountered, developing strategies to maximize safety and minimize threat. If your parents were emotionally unavailable, your brain learned that love is scarce and must be earned through performance. If your family was chaotic, your nervous system became hypervigilant, always scanning for signs of danger. These adaptations made perfect sense in your childhood environment. They helped you survive. But they became psychological prisons when you carried them into adult relationships and situations that were completely different from your original family dynamics. Jung identified several types of complexes that commonly form in childhood. The mother complex develops from your relationship with your primary caregiver and shapes how you give and receive love throughout your life. If your mother was anxious and overprotective, you might develop an unconscious belief that the world is dangerous and you need someone else to take care of you. If she was critical and demanding, you might internalize the belief that you're never good enough and spend your adult life trying to prove your worth. The father complex influences your relationship with authority, power, and achievement. Weak or absent father might leave you struggling with initiative and direction, constantly seeking external validation. An authoritarian father might create a complex around rebellion or submission, leaving you either compulsively defying authority or surrendering your personal power to others. But Jung's most profound insight was about the shadow, the parts of yourself that you learn to hide or deny in order to maintain your parents' love and approval. Every child develops a false self, a carefully crafted persona designed to meet their caregiver's conscious and unconscious expectations. The aspects of your authentic self that were rejected, criticized, or ignored get pushed into the shadow, where they continue to influence your behavior in hidden ways. Modern neuroscience has revealed the biological mechanisms behind Jung's observations. When children experience chronic stress, their brains develop heightened inflammation markers that persist into adulthood. The amygdala, responsible for threat detection, becomes hyperactive. The prefrontal cortex, which governs rational decision-making, becomes underdeveloped. The hippocampus, crucial for memory processing, shows reduced volume. This means that adults with unresolved childhood trauma literally have different brain structures than those who experienced secure attachments. Their nervous systems are calibrated for survival rather than thriving. They live in a constant state of subtle hypervigilance, their bodies producing stress hormones even in safe situations. The personal unconscious that Jung described is actually a vast network of implicit memories, emotional and sensory impressions stored in the body before the verbal, thinking mind was fully developed. These implicit memories don't feel like memories at all. They feel like reality. They create the background emotional tone of your entire life experience. This is why traditional talk therapy often falls short of creating lasting change. You can understand intellectually that your father's criticism doesn't define your worth, but if your nervous system still carries the implicit memory of feeling small and ashamed in his presence, that understanding remains purely conceptual. Your body continues to react as if you're still that vulnerable child. Jung understood that healing required more than insight. It required what he called active imagination, a process of engaging directly with the unconscious contents of the psyche. He developed techniques for dialoguing with different parts of the self, integrating shadow aspects and gradually bringing unconscious patterns into conscious awareness. The goal wasn't to eliminate these patterns entirely, but to transform your relationship with them. Instead of being unconsciously controlled by your complexes, you could learn to recognize them, understand their protective function, and choose whether or not to follow their directives. The consequences of carrying unhealed childhood wounds into adulthood extend far beyond what most people realize. These early imprints don't just affect your relationships, They shape your entire reality by determining what you perceive, how you interpret events, and what possibilities you can even imagine for yourself. Jung observed that people unconsciously recreate their childhood dynamics in every area of their adult lives. This happens through what psychologists now call confirmation, bias, and projection. Your unconscious mind seeks out people and situations that confirm the beliefs you formed about yourself and the world during your earliest years. If you learned that love comes with conditions, you'll unconsciously choose partners who withhold affection until you perform according to their expectations. If you internalize the belief that you're not worthy of success, you'll sabotage opportunities just before they would lead to the recognition you claim to want. If you develop the conviction that the world is unsafe, you'll make choices that keep you small and limited, always finding reasons why you can't take the risks necessary for growth. This psychological phenomenon creates what Jung called synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that seem to confirm your deepest beliefs about reality. But these aren't mystical occurrences. They're the result of your unconscious mind directing your attention toward information that supports your existing worldview while filtering out evidence that contradicts it. The cognitive bias research has revealed how this works on a neurological level. Your brain processes approximately 11 million bits of information per second, but your conscious mind can only handle about 40 bits. The unconscious mind determines which 40 bits you become aware of based on the patterns and priorities established during your formative years. This selective perception creates what researchers call emotional schemas, internal templates that determine how you interpret ambiguous situations. If your father was unpredictably angry, you might develop a schema that interprets neutral facial expressions as threatening. If your mother was emotionally distant, you might interpret someone's need for space as rejection. These interpretations feel absolutely real and objective, but they're actually projections of your internal landscape onto external reality. The consequences compound over time. Each misinterpretation leads to behavioral choices that create real-world outcomes that seem to confirm your negative beliefs. You withdraw from the partner who needed space, and they interpret your withdrawal as lack of interest. You avoid the promotion opportunity because you don't feel worthy, and someone else gets the position. You respond defensively to constructive feedback, and people stop offering it. Jung called this the repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate familiar patterns even when they're painful. Your psyche would rather deal with known suffering than unknown possibilities. This is why people often feel more comfortable in dysfunction than in healthy relationships, more familiar with struggle than with ease. The biological consequences are equally profound. Adults carrying unresolved childhood trauma show elevated levels of inflammatory markers throughout their bodies. They're more prone to autoimmune disorders, cardiovascular disease, depression, and anxiety. Their nervous systems remain locked, in survival mode, burning through energy reserves and creating chronic fatigue and brain fog. But perhaps the most tragic consequence is the loss of authentic self-expression. The false self you created to maintain your parents' love becomes so habitual that you forget who you really are underneath the performance. You might achieve external success while feeling empty inside. You might have many acquaintances but struggle with deep intimacy. You might be surrounded by people but feel fundamentally alone. Jung understood that this disconnection from authenticity creates what he called neurosis, not a mental illness, but a split between who you really are and who you think you need to be. This split requires enormous energy to maintain, leaving little vitality for creativity, joy, and genuine connection. The shadow aspects you rejected in childhood don't disappear. They become projected onto others. You might find yourself repeatedly frustrated with people who display qualities you had to suppress in yourself. You might be attracted to partners who embody the spontaneity or assertiveness you couldn't express, then resent them for having what you lack. This projection creates a world full of enemies and obstacles, but they're actually mirror reflections of your own disowned parts. The very qualities that irritate you most in others are often the aspects of yourself that you learn to hide or deny. Understanding these invisible consequences is the first step toward breaking free from unconscious patterns that have been running your life. Breaking free from childhood programming requires what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who you really are rather than who you were conditioned to be. This isn't about rejecting your past or blaming your parents. It's about consciously choosing which patterns to keep and which to transform. The first step is developing what Jung termed the observing self, the part of you that can witness your automatic reactions without being consumed by them. When you feel triggered by someone's behavior, instead of immediately defending or attacking, you pause and ask, "What is this reminding me of? When did I first feel this way?" This simple practice begins to create space between you and your unconscious patterns. You start to recognize that your intense emotional reactions are often disproportionate to present circumstances because they're being amplified by unresolved experiences from your past. Jung developed a technique called active imagination for engaging directly with these unconscious contents. You imagine yourself in dialogue with the part of you that carries a particular wound or pattern. You might visualize your 5-year-old self and ask what they needed that they didn't receive. You might dialogue with the inner critic that sounds like your parents' voice and discover the protective intention behind its harsh judgments. This isn't just psychological speculation. Neuroscience has confirmed that these visualization practices actually rewire neural pathways. When you compassionately attend to wounded parts of yourself, you activate the same brain networks involved in secure attachment. Your nervous system begins to learn that safety and healing are possible. The key is approaching these wounded parts with curiosity rather than judgment. Your defense mechanisms developed for good reasons. Your people-pleasing protected you from criticism. Your emotional walls kept you safe from further abandonment. Your perfectionism helped you avoid shame. Honoring the wisdom of these strategies, while gradually updating them for your current circumstances, is essential. Jung emphasized the importance of integrating shadow aspects, the qualities you rejected in yourself. If you learn to be good by suppressing anger, you need to reconnect with your healthy aggression. If you learn to be responsible by denying your needs for play and spontaneity, you need to reclaim your capacity for joy. If you learned to be strong by hiding vulnerability, you need to discover that sharing your authentic feelings actually creates deeper connection. This integration process often involves what Jung called holding the tension of opposites. Instead of seeing yourself as either confident or insecure, you recognize that you're both. Instead of believing you must choose between independence and connection, you develop the capacity for both autonomy and intimacy. The practical work involves gradually expanding your window of tolerance for uncomfortable emotions. When you feel anxiety, instead of immediately trying to fix or escape it, you breathe deeply and allow yourself to feel it fully. You discover that emotions are temporary experiences, not permanent states of being. You also begin to challenge the limiting beliefs that were installed during childhood. When you hear the voice in your head saying, "I'm not good enough," you question whether that's actually true or just an old program running. You look for evidence that contradicts these beliefs and consciously feed your mind new information about your capabilities and worth. Perhaps most importantly, you start making choices based on your authentic desires rather than unconscious compulsions. You notice when you're about to repeat a familiar pattern and ask yourself, "Is this what I really want, or is this just what feels familiar?" You gradually build the courage to disappoint others in service of honoring yourself. This process isn't easy or quick. Jung called it the work of a lifetime. But each small act of conscious choice begins to shift your entire relationship with reality. You stop being a victim of your past and start becoming the author of your future. Here's the truth that Jung spent his entire career trying to convey. Your childhood didn't just create your problems, it also created your greatest potential. The very wounds that have caused you the most suffering contain the seeds of your most profound gifts. Jung called this the wounded healer archetype. The sensitive child who was criticized for being too emotional grows up to become the therapist who can hold space for others' pain. The child who felt powerless in a chaotic family becomes the leader who creates stability for others. The child who experienced loneliness develops extraordinary empathy and the ability to truly see other people. Your deepest wounds point toward your soul's purpose. The areas where you suffered the most are often where you're meant to serve. The patterns you've struggled to heal in yourself become the very patterns you're uniquely equipped to help others transform. This isn't about spiritual bypassing or pretending that trauma is somehow good. It's about recognizing that consciousness has the power to transform even the most painful experiences into sources of wisdom and compassion. When you fully integrate your childhood experiences, both the wounds and the gifts, you develop what Jung called the transcendent function. The transcendent function is your capacity to hold paradox, to be simultaneously broken and whole, wounded and wise, human and divine. You stop needing to be perfect or completely healed in order to live a meaningful life. You recognize that your imperfections and struggles are not obstacles to overcome, but essential aspects of your humanity to embrace. This realization fundamentally changes your relationship with suffering. Instead of seeing emotional pain as evidence that something is wrong with you, you begin to understand it as information about what needs attention and care. Instead of trying to eliminate all discomfort from your life, you develop the capacity to be present with difficulty while maintaining inner stability. You also stop waiting for someone else to heal you or complete you. You recognize that the love you've been seeking from others has always been available within you. The parent you needed to approve of you lives inside you as the wise, compassionate adult you've become. The unconditional acceptance you craved becomes something you can offer yourself. This doesn't mean you no longer need other people. It means you relate to them from wholeness rather than neediness. You can enjoy intimacy without losing yourself. You can receive love without becoming dependent. You can offer support without becoming responsible for others' happiness. Jung understood that true healing doesn't happen in isolation. It requires community, relationship, and the courage to be seen in your authenticity. As you do your own work of integration, you naturally attract others who are on similar journeys. You begin to experience the kinds of relationships you dreamed of as a child, but didn't know how to create. The final paradox is this: when you stop trying to escape your childhood programming and instead turn toward it with compassion and curiosity, it loses its power to control you. The very act of conscious awareness transforms unconscious patterns. The wounds that once defined you become sources of strength. The stories that once limited you become wisdom that can guide others. Your childhood created your adult problems, yes, but your adult consciousness has the power to transform those problems into your greatest gifts. This is Jung's ultimate message. You are not doomed to repeat the patterns of your past. You have the capacity to consciously participate in your own evolution. If this video has resonated with you, I encourage you to engage with it by leaving a comment about which childhood pattern you're ready to transform. Subscribe for more content that supports your journey of awakening, and share this with someone who might benefit from understanding how their own childhood continues to shape their adult experience. The work of individuation is the work of becoming fully human. It's the most important work you'll ever do.